What's going on, guys? Crafty Rick here. In today's episode I'll show you how to make your own underwater dioramas with deep pour epoxy from SRC. Let's get to it. Alright, I'm using this XPS foam to create the base of this diorama. I use one of these two pieces to create the geographical features. My aim is to create some slight elevation at the bottom of this underwater scene. Once I have my layout, the extra pieces of XPS foam can be carved to make rocks. Be mindful when using sharp tools. Also, XPS foam dulls your blades quickly, so make sure you're prepared for that as well. I carve away at the foam pieces until I'm satisfied with their size. Then I proceed to sand down the bottom in order to glue them in place. I use tacky glue to create a strong bond. I set it aside to dry and bring out the main feature of this diorama, a 1/300 scale model of a B-29 Super Fortress. For all the Fallout fans, I'm recreating a popular location in both the real world and Fallout New Vegas, a crashed B-29 at the bottom of Lake Mead. The warplane at the bottom of the lake is a well-known historical wreck, a World War II era Boeing B-29 Super Fortress, which crashed in 1948 and now rests deep under the lake's surface. I place the plane on the foam and start to visualize how it's gonna line up. For the next step, I use plaster of Paris to coat the foam. I follow the directions on the container and start mixing up. Using a craft stick, I cover as much of the surface as possible. Then, using sandpaper, I round up some of the rough edges and bring the piece to a smooth finish. Deep pour epoxies offer fantastic results for underwater dioramas. I'm making a mold for this B-29 as a backup, just in case. I start with modeling clay to make our mold. It will sit on a piece of PVC plastic. The walls of this box will also be PVC sheets. When making a two-part mold this way, you want to press your master figure onto the clay, making sure you cover at least half of it. I raise the clay in some places, like the stabilizers. Then I use this sculpting tool to get a cleaner border all around this warplane. Once that's done, I grab a screwdriver and press some registration or keyholes for this mold. Make sure they're all around your model. I use hot glue to start building the walls of this mold enclosure. Make sure to press the clay against the walls to prevent unwanted leaks. And now we can close our container. Looks good to go. Let's spread with Poly's 2500 release agent. Shake your can vigorously and apply a coat to your model in clay. Then use a brush to apply evenly. This time around we have Custom Mold 25T. It is a 10:1 parts ratio mix. And pretty straightforward, just combine and mix well. And of course, make sure you're wearing protection. Once fully mixed and a solid color, apply all over your model. I don't have any specialty tools, so I tap lightly to remove some bubbles. Not all the bubbles cleared, but my style of crafting is very forgiving, and the more imperfections the better. While the mold was curing, I added additional rocks to the diorama. Now I take off the bottom PVC and carefully remove the clay. The first half looks good, but I have to make sure all the clay is removed. So I carefully remove it and use a brush to get it all out. These are PVC pieces from the same sheet as the container walls. These stamps will act as air release ducts for my mold, so I need to attach them to most of the high points on this model. And for this step I just use hot glue. My plane doesn't need to be perfect, therefore I'm not worried about losing details on the model. With every stem in place, I now spray Pol-Ease on the mold. Once it dries, I pour my second half of the silicone on the mold. I'll set it aside to cure and begin sealing and painting the terrain portion of the diorama. For this step, I mix acrylic paint, wood glue, and a bit of water. Once thoroughly combined, the whole surface can be painted. It dries rock solid. We'll set this aside and go back to the B-29 mold. It looks fully cured, so the walls can be removed. And this is where I realized I made a mistake. The silicone parts fused together due to improper mixing and poor temperature control in my workshop. I tried to pull it apart to no avail. So I removed the stems and figure out a way around it. In the last video I made a one-part mold for custom action figures. What I'll be doing here is basically the same concept. I cut into the mold and carefully work the model plane out of it. I lost some propellers, but nothing that can't be fixed with super glue. I should be able to make this work since it's pretty much the same technique used for the custom figure mold I mentioned. I spray some release agent in a cup and brush it inside the silicone mold to make sure I get every crevice. Time for another new product from SRC. Fabricast 50 is an impact resistant resin with a bright white finish. It is a 1:1 mix ratio and it turns solid white in just 15 minutes, so you gotta be quick. I use a syringe to inject the resin in my mold. This allows the resin to push out the bubbles. Once cured, I remove all the excess and begin carefully extracting my plain casting. Perfect! A few bubbles, but this is an underwater B-29. It will show some distress. Now we work on the lake bed scenery and apply Vallejo diorama effects, earth texture, to add variety to the terrain. Apply until you're satisfied. Then I cover it with brown paint. While the paint is still wet, I apply yellows and lighter browns. Let it dry, and now it's time to prime the B-29 Super Fortress. A coat of flat black will do. Can't forget to paint the rocks. I make them gray and apply highlights and a light dry brushing using white. It's really coming together. Let's add some vegetation to this diorama. I use blended turfs, static grass and Spanish moss to add another layer of detail. Then I secure all of it with tacky glue. I use some water to dilute the glue so it's easier to apply the turf blends. Shake off the excess and let your terrain dry. For further details, I add some sifted rocks from the creek nearby. I use PVA glue for these. The super fortress is ready to be weathered, so I use Vallejo rust texture for this step. I brush it onto the whole plane and set it aside to dry. With the vegetation and rocks in place, we're going to add a protective layer for the resin pour. This is diluted PVA glue with water. Cover the whole thing and remove the excess. This step creates a coat between your resin and your terrain when you're doing a deep pour. It also seals any potential leaks and possible bubbles, and set it aside to dry overnight. In the meantime, let's add more rust to this plane with rust from Dirty Down. Apply it on your model and watch it rust away. Then I dry brush some metallic miniature paint to bring out some of the metal. Looks ready to be submerged, but we need to seal all that paint and rust effects. So I use Citadel Hardcoat and brush it on the model. This is where the plane will sit on the base of this diorama. I secure it with tacky glue. And I have an additional model just in case. It's great to have duplicates, since deep pours can be tricky. Now let's make the containing walls for the resin. I use these clear acrylic sheets for this step and hot glue to glue them to the base. I try to use plenty of hot glue to seal any potential leaks on the edges. Then inspect for gaps. Let's do the deep pour. This time around, I'm going to dye my resin ahead of time for a consistent color when doing layers of deep pour resin. So I'm using green and we're going to dye the base resin. The goal is to get a slightly darker tone than required, since it will dilute when you mix the equal parts. So I continue adding resin ink until I achieve the desired color. Let's set up to mix the resin. Always make sure to cover your workspace and wear PPE. I mix equal parts resin in this bucket and start stirring. Then once mixed, it's time to pour. I used a heat gun to help remove bubbles. Use it on the low setting and 6 to 8 inches away from the resin. And then disaster. There was a recent winter storm that my Red Rocket workshop was just not prepared for, so the indoor temperatures changed radically. Sometime during the curing process, the resin went through a flash cure process, making bubbles appear all over the diorama, and also warping it all the way around. It looks okay, but it's not the result I was hoping for. I can still save it by trying to infill the outermost bubbles and edges. It also appears that the heat generated created a faint bubbling effect coming off of the B-29, which makes it look like it just got submerged. If you played Fallout New Vegas, you might be familiar with the quest Volare, which basically requires you to bring the plane out of the water. I guess in this case, we can say that the flotation devices failed and the plane sunk back down. I drilled some holes and sanded down as best as I could. And then I filled up with resin to save this diorama. Even though I was prepared with other plain castings, I just didn't have enough resin for a second big diorama. So I made this smaller version using the original B-29. Over the years, I've done multiple resin pours, and I always try to prepare for unexpected variables. Now here's key takeaways from this experience. Make sure you plan ahead, keep an eye out for weather conditions, and check how and where you store your resin. Also have a plan B. In this case, I made a casting of the original plane just to be on the safe side. Another thing too is if you have time and resources, you can do a sample test. That way you can determine the condition of your resin. It is a difficult yet rewarding craft to master. I'm sharing my experience so that you can avoid my mistakes and get the best results for your projects. And that is it for this one, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.